Hello, everyone, and welcome to our Pitch Wars Live Young Adult Mentor Chat. We have 5 mentors with us this hour, and then we're going to have 5 more mentors joining us next hour. So I hope you're settled in for a nice 2-hour chat. I have 3 beverages, so I'm ready. We're going to have all the mentors start off by introducing themselves. So just their names, what they write, and kind of their Pitch Wars history, their history with Pitch Wars, whatever it may be. So we're going to start with my agent sibling, Margie. Oh, you're muted.
Hello, I'm Margie, and I write young adult paranormal. I wrote this book here, Vampires, Hearts, and Other Dead Things, that came out last month. And this is my 2nd year mentoring. And previously, I was a mentee in 2017 and 2018. And this is actually my 2018 Pitch Wars book. And my 2017 Pitch Wars book is going to be coming out in a year. So.
I'll go with Kylie next. We'll just go around the circle.
Got it. Hey everyone, I'm Kylie Schachte. I am a YA and new adult Pitch Wars mentor, obviously, otherwise I wouldn't be here. I write YA kind of noirish mystery. So my book, You're Next, came out in 2020. The paperback is out now and it has this pretty new cover, so you should go buy it. It's available everywhere books are sold. And this is my 3rd year mentoring for Pitch Wars. I was also a mentee in 2017, which is when I met Margie for the first time. So yeah, I've been with Pitch Wars basically for my entire publishing career at this point, and I'm going to get buried in the Pitch Wars cemetery, essentially.
Hello, everybody. Oh, are we going around that way? We're talking this way. Okay, I'll go because I'm not muted. I am Lyssa Mia Smith. I write young adult speculative fiction, usually with a pretty serious romantic twist. I was a Pitch Wars mentee in 2018, and then again in 2020, this past year. And this is my first time mentoring with Hoda Agarazi.
Hi, I'm Gabi Burton. I'm a YA fantasy and mystery author. I've actually never done anything with Pitch Wars. I've never been a mentee or mentor. I did, fun fact, sub to Kylie last year with a mystery, but my debut is a fantasy. So, yeah.
Unmute. Yay. Hi, I'm Carly, and I am mentoring young adult, pretty much all genres. A little background with me and Pitch Wars. Oh, my novel is The Reckless Kind. And I submitted this novel to Pitch Wars in 2016, and it was rejected. And I got an agent anyway, and now it's coming out in November. And now I'm Pitch Wars mentor, so I'm really excited.
All right, I'm excited that we have 2 people on here who neither of you are mentees, right? Yeah, okay, just clarifying, because it seems like the chats tend to skew towards people who were mentees or were mentors before. I think maybe because they're just more comfortable participating in them. But we actually, this year is like 50% of the mentors had never been Pitch Wars mentors before. And something like 20-25%, somewhere around there, had never been a mentee or a mentor before. So they're like new to Pitch Wars, which is very exciting. All right, so y'all can go ahead and start asking your questions in the comments. Just a heads up, we don't take anything that's like pre-queries or anything that's just hyper specific to your personal situation, because we want to keep it kind of helpful for everyone who's watching. So just a heads up on that, but go ahead and start asking your questions. And by the way, I'm Sarah. I'm on the board for Pitch Wars, and I'm the current agent liaison. And on the Twitter account, handling the Twitter account today is Lee Mar. And so if you're watching embedded on Twitter, if you can click over to YouTube and watch it there, that's going to help a little bit. But if you have to ask a question on Twitter, Lee will bring it over for us. And then also Danny, he's DT in the comments, is here tonight to keep an eye out for like trolls and spam and that kind of stuff. So thank you, Danny, for volunteering to do that. All right, first question. Do you have any advice on writing a query letter and a synopsis for a dual POV or multi-POV story?
Ooh, I can speak to that because I my debut is a dual POV, and so my query is dual POV. So what I did was I did 2 queries, now I remember it. So I had one version of the query where I just kind of wrote the query from the point of view of essentially like the character who kind of had the most going on in the plot, and so that kind of worked. And then I also did another query, which was the first paragraph was one character's plot, and then the second paragraph was the other POV character's plot, and then the third paragraph was kind of like how it all came together. And so actually, I think the back flap copy for The Reckless kind of does it similar. So if you go on Amazon and read the back flap copy for my book, it kind of goes over the same thing. So you can do that where you can kind of make a paragraph that's one character, then the other character, and then the third paragraph kind of brings it all together. Or you can just, who is the character who has the most to lose in your manuscript, and then write, not from their POV, but write it as if the book is about them. And then just at some point mention that it's dual POV.
I would. Oh, go for it.
Oh, sorry. I would echo that as well. Last year I was querying a book that was 5 POVs. And I did the same thing where I just focused from one person's perspective, and that worked really well. It was easier to focus when it was that main person. And for me, the main person was the person who started the book, so the first point of view, just because when agents start reading the pages, or when we start reading the pages, that's the first person we're going to meet. So it is, I think, helpful if that's the person that you've introduced in the query as well. And in terms of a synopsis, I think it's often easier if when you're writing the synopsis, think about moments when they're all doing things together, and you can phrase it that way too. You don't have to make it all very individual. Explain how they know each other, how they meet, and then any moment where you can to make it more of a group activity, it does make it easier since you're very limited in words, obviously.
Yeah, I completely agree with what everybody said so far. And I would just say to Carly's suggestion to go check out her book on Amazon and read the back cover copy. I think just in general, looking at the synopsis on Goodreads or the back flap of any book that's multi-POV usually is going to follow a somewhat similar structure for the query. And just in general, reading a Goodreads synopsis or the back cover copy, the inside jacket flap copy is a really good model for writing queries in general. And particularly for a one-page synopsis, you're kind of, regardless of the way your book is written, you're usually going to be writing that in almost a third-person omniscient tone anyway, because it's more focused on the major beats of the story. So it almost doesn't matter which part of the story is being told from which POV. It's more hitting those beats of what's the inciting incident, what's the catalyst, what's the midpoint, the climax, all of that kind of stuff. And the particular perspective doesn't really factor into it as much.
For the synopsis, I recently did one with my agent for a proposal that was 4 points of view. And one thing that she had me do at the beginning of the synopsis that I absolutely loved was just one line about each character to just kind of give that little bit deeper into the character before getting into the main plot points.
All right, cool. Yeah, I love Kylie's. I think it was Kylie who suggested reading the back cover copy of books that are similar to yours. That's always my go-to for any question about query letters, basically. Okay. What would your ideal collaboration style be? I'm assuming with a mentee is the question.
I can go first. I, first of all, try to really let my mentee lead with what they feel comfortable with. I know that a lot of people really want to have that super close personal relationship with their mentor, and I am all for that if that's something that you're up for. I'm very close with both of my previous mentees. We have very friendly friends relationships even now and still talk to each other regularly. But I also know that not everybody feels comfortable with that. And there's still a lot that you can get out of the program, even if you're not trying to like find a new best friend. So I try to start the mentorship with a conversation about like, what are you trying to get out of this? Like, how can I best support you in a way that is not stressful? And is actually, you know, helping you instead of creating additional social burdens or whatever it is. So I spent some time at the beginning kind of getting on the same page with you about like what you're looking to get out of our relationship. And I'm going to always respect those boundaries. But yeah, I'm always going to be like, regardless of what our personal social relationship is, I'm always about like being the absolute biggest champion for your book of anybody ever. I'm quite competitive about it. So like I will fight anybody who claims that they love your book more than I do if I pick you. So I think like our social relationship is something that we can navigate separately, but like that's kind of the core of what I believe in terms of why I'm choosing to work with you is I believe in you as a writer and I believe in you as somebody who deserves to have their story on shelves. And so based on that, I can tailor whatever our working style is in the way that's going to make it as easy as possible for you to get there. But it has to always kind of be about both like, what is it that you're wanting? And then also like, what is your creative vision for the story first and foremost? So I'm not about being a mentor so that I can like turn your book into what I think that book should be or the way that I would write it if it were my story. It's about thinking about your particular talents as a writer and then how do I make it so that you are most empowered to like allow those to shine as much as possible.
I've mentored for other programs before, and so I do like to have like a phone call or a Zoom meeting, or you can just email if you're not into the voice way of doing things. And I like to focus on talking about what your goals are, and I want to help you make your manuscript the best that it can be for what you are wanting to say with it. And sometimes, you know, you don't want someone just like putting in some thoughts that aren't vibing with the direction that you want to go with it. So I want to make sure that we're on the same page. And then, you know, I make some notes on parts that I would love to know more about what's going on with the character or how we can tighten up the plot. And then then I can talk through any problems that you're having as far as the revision goes. And I'm pretty, you know, we can make it the relationship that you want it to be. But basically, I just want to help facilitate you making your manuscript everything that you want it to be so that it can have the best chance at getting an agent.
Personally, I would like a new best friend. Not a requirement, but that is something that I would enjoy. But I'm pretty flexible. I'm open to really whatever my mentee, future mentee wants out of our relationship. I think the most important thing is kind of like what Kylie was saying, making sure that you feel comfortable enough telling me like, hey, I disagree with this. This is something that I feel strongly about so that I'm not bulldozing over you. The goal is that we're like working together to make your manuscript as good as possible, not me telling you what to do. So the end goal is, regardless of if we're best friends, is that one, I will cheer you on forever, literally forever. I will die cheering you on. But also that you know that you can tell me, hey, I don't know if I like that idea, and that's totally fine. That's really important to me.
Just going to echo kind of the same thing, but yeah, if you want to be friends, like, cool. I like more friends. I'm good friends with my mentee from last year, but also like the ball's in your court. We can kind of discuss like what works best for you. And as far as communication, and the main thing is I just want my mentee to feel comfortable, like coming to me when they're like having a bad week and they're struggling and they're not sure they can do it. Like I want them to feel comfortable texting me or emailing me or whatever communication style they prefer. That's what's really important to me.
Did everyone answer? Or that wanted to answer anyway?
I didn't, but so much good stuff was said. So I'll just add to sort of highlight what Margie said, that for me, it really comes down to communication. In my ideal collaboration would be someone who feels comfortable telling me not only the changes they want, but how they prefer in terms of, text, phone call, back off, read every act one piece at a time, give me space, give me resources, and just someone who works hard, bottom line for me.
All right. And I realize I forgot to say at the very beginning of this that if you don't know what Pitch Wars is and you've stumbled across this video, Pitch Wars is an annual mentoring event where authors and industry pros mentor one author, and they do a full round of revisions with them, and that ends in an agent showcase. And you can find more at pitchwars.org. But I'm also going to put a link, because the post just went up today, on how to prepare your Pitch Wars submission. We have a lot of questions. We always get a lot of questions about like formatting and like, what do I put and how do I do this and blah, blah, blah. So that is all answered on that post. So make sure you go check that out. Excuse me. All right. So our next question is from Ruby. How do you all feel about lower YA?
So I'll jump in here. This was a conversation I had with my writing group, which is a bunch of people who were in Pitch Wars 2018 with me. We all were in agreement that there is not enough lower YA or younger YA. I know my agent has said it's something that she's hungry for, and it seems like more and more times it becomes upper MG than lower YA, but there seems to be more and more of a gap in what is selling, and it seems like a good time for a lower YA.
Yes, I agree. I'm a big fan. I do personally like, if it's younger YA, I really like to delve into the psychology and the emotions of that character. Just for me, my personal taste, I'm less of an action-oriented person. I would love the plot to be driven by the character and the character arc and what choices the character is making and how they're growing as a character for younger YA. And so that's my personal taste. If you're thinking about setting younger YA, to me, just make it very character driven and about the character's psychology.
Agree. Definitely that there is for sure a space in the market that's been going kind of like untapped into as far as younger YA goes. I will throw out there as like one extra consideration that this isn't obviously true all the time, 100%, but as kind of a general rule of thumb, kids generally want to read older rather than read under their age. I think kids who are in high school are often already reading adult books or looking ahead to what college might be like, kind of imagining what their future life might be. And I know that there certainly used to be, I feel like I don't see this as much anymore, but I'm not as versed in the middle grade market these days as I once was when I was a kids bookseller. But I feel like there used to be more middle grade books that had kids in high school in them, like Stargirl by Jerry Spinelli, I know is like high school characters, and that's definitely middle grade. It's also written before sort of like current YA middle grade market was what it was. So I think Lyssa's point about like thinking about the upper middle grade versus lower YA distinction, if you are somebody who's trying to find a place for your book, maybe spending some time thinking about like between middle grade and YA more so than age, or in addition to age. Sorry if you can hear my cat clawing at my door. In addition to age, I think there are also sort of distinctions in like theme and tone and voice and sort of like story structure that distinguish those two categories. It might be worth thinking about what makes something middle grade versus YA beyond age and where your book might sit best. Because I think I am starting to see more agents looking for lower YA, but I feel like I'm seeing maybe even more looking for upper middle grade.
All right. I was wondering what that sound was. I was like, am I hearing something?
There's a baby gate on my office door, and like there's nothing in here for her. There's no reason for her to be in here, but like the sight of a closed bars, she's like, I am in prison, I must escape.
Mm-hmm. It's typical. All right. Brittany asks, what type of characters do you usually find yourself drawn to? Sorry if I'm like vibrating.
Evil
like
ones.
Really cold right now. Evil ones.
I really like really evil characters. Those are like my favorite. I like characters who are good too, whatever. But the ones who are darker are my favorite personally. Which does not mean that you shouldn't like sub to me if your characters aren't literally evil, but that is like a bonus, I think.
So I guess I'll be the exact opposite to Gabi, because I'm like anxious little beans are definitely my the type of character I love. I'm not a really big on like the evil character, the dark character. I really am drawn to the like wholesome, the wholesome neurotic character. I kind of, you know, you see on my wish list, I have a bunch of Ted Lasso gifts. And so I would love to get that kind of, I don't know what you call it, like just the wholesome energy. But wholesome, but feel free to be naughty too. But I love characters who mean really well and are trying really, really hard to be good despite difficulties.
I really, less so than like straight up evil, although I can definitely vibe with that. I think I find myself really drawn to unlikable characters, and by that I mean like complex human beings who, particularly when we're able to get into that really immediate personal voice that is so prevalent in YA, and I mean that about both like first person or third person regardless. I think I love when I can feel like I have this sense of intimacy with a character where I'm able to hear maybe the like thoughts that they would not admit to having out loud to other people. And that's what adds the sort of like complexity or unlikability to the character, where they can be sort of like honest and vulnerable in the interior life of the story in a way that, like, I don't know, maybe isn't totally like palatable, wholesome, whatever, but makes me feel that much closer to them, because like who doesn't have dark, shitty thoughts about the world around them?
Yeah, I like the unlikable ones as well. Like I can get into a sweet, you know, kind character, but I also love just a little bit of ruthlessness. I love when a character just wants something so desperately that they will hurt other people, even if they don't realize it at the moment. So that's just something that really draws me in.
Yeah, I think all of you are describing characters I would very happily read. I tend to lean probably more towards Kylie, where I really like a realistic character, even if they're in a fantastical situation, but someone who perhaps is like their voice, they're thinking things that we never say out loud to other people, but you read it and you're like, oh my God, that's exactly my biggest insecurity. So things that sort of jump off the page like that, no matter the situation. Yeah, I tend to like a pretty close voice in that way.
All right. Margie, are you on the West Coast? Because your lighting right now is amazing. It's like ethereal.
I'm in California, so I'm facing the window. So
yeah, you're like, it's like a glow. It's got like this Instagram filter naturally over it.
Yay.
All right. Emily asked, how long should a query be in total versus the part of the query that's about the book?
So I think mileage probably varies on this, but having been in the query trenches for many, many years, the advice I was often given was 250 words dedicated to your book if you can, and then maybe another 50 words. I have seen this broken so many times. I don't think it's a hard and fast rule at all, but for someone writing queries potentially for the first time, it's probably a good starting place. So like a 250 about the book and then 50 about you.
And I think for like a one-page query, which your query should be a page, it would be like 3 paragraphs usually about your book. Some people end up condensing it into 2. I tend to think it works a little better as 3 in most cases. And then like a housekeeping paragraph with your word count, your comps, your genre, that type of thing. And then maybe a bio paragraph if you want one. By the time I got to end of querying, I was so fed up with everything that I was just like, fuck it, nobody gets a bio. I'm not writing it anymore. So take that as you will.
Yeah, I do feel like most, I mean, bios are fine. They're nice. Like, it's cool to know something about someone, but like, it's not going to make the decision on whether or not you're requesting a book. So, all right. Oh, this is a fun question. What is your biggest revising or mentoring strength?
So I pride myself in being able to figure out what a character would and wouldn't do. So if one of your characters is doing something that's unrealistic, that's a quick way to pull readers from the stories. Like, oh, you know, Carrie would never do this. She just said this the other page. So like deep characterization and making sure characters are being consistent. That's a strength of mine. A new skill that I'm looking forward to honing is cutting words. I'm much better than I used to be at tightening a plot. I'm an overwriter, and so it's taken me a long time to figure out how to keep my story the same, but get rid of lots of excessive words. And I'm a psychologist by day, so I like to think of myself as a supportive person and someone who's got a good read on people and what they need. So that's me.
Yeah, for me, I focus more on character stuff and like how to bring the most emotion out of the scene and like character motivation, what they're thinking and feeling, and how they can, make how they can drive the plot. I'm not so much a, finding the plot holes type of person. I more read for emotion. So my feedback is more like, I'm not feeling this scene. Can we make this scene feel a little bit more for the reader? That sort of thing.
So
and I think
oh, go ahead.
Oh no, you go. I think last time I went, so you should go.
Fair enough. So I think I talk about this a little bit on my wish list, but I think kind of my biggest strength as a mentor is I'm really good at identifying what the hook of your book is. So what makes it special, what is going to make it stand out against a crowded marketplace, what would make an agent, an editor, and ultimately a reader actually pick it up and want to spend money on it. Because I assume that, granted, there's so many incredible things that you can get out of pitch wars that are not just like an agent, a book deal, whatever, fame and fortune. But I assume that if you're applying, that your goal here is getting traditionally published. And so I want, if that's your goal, that's going to be my goal too, because again, champion of your book. And so I want to really take an approach to working on edits that are going to make that as feasible as possible for you. So I have a really in-depth understanding of the YA market. I spend a lot of my time researching, understanding what's happening in the market right now, what kinds of trends are out there. I'm also a trend researcher by day. And so that doesn't mean, and I say this in my wish list, but that doesn't mean I'm going to take your, werewolf book and be like, this should be Dragon Shifters because that's trendier or whatever. It's again about understanding why your book is already special and thinking about how can we draw out the most special parts of it while also, correcting any of the things that maybe make it not as good of a fit or aren't allowing those special parts of your book to shine as much as possible so that, again, it's going to be attractive from a commercial perspective. But because, again, the only thing to get out of pitch wars is certainly not an agent, a book deal, whatever, I come at that from a perspective of building broader storytelling skills. So learning to identify, okay, you're maybe struggling a little bit with pacing or with character arcs or whatever. How can we teach you about that on a bigger level so that you have those skills the next time you sit down to write a book? And then the third piece of it, I think for me is I try to really place a huge emphasis on self-care in a meaningful way. Publishing is really hard. I've struggled pretty heavily with burnout, mental health issues, all kinds of things along the course of my publishing journey. And I think I don't pretend that I have hard-earned wisdom, or that like I necessarily know what I'm talking about here. I'm still very much like learning to practice what I preach, but I want that to be a collaborative process between the two of us as well, figuring out what your boundaries are and how you can implement them and protect yourself, because it's a hard industry and one where like nobody's going to do that stuff for you if you're not doing it for yourself.
I think for me, knowing like if the emotional beats of your story are landing or like how people are feeling as they're reading it, because you like write something, you're supposed to be surprised, and you're like, oh, that's not landing the way that you like want it to, or like, oh, I'm shocked at this part, or oh, I'm like really rooting for these two people to end up together, or something like that. So just like working through like how people are feeling as they're reading it, if they're feeling the way you wanted them to feel when they read it, and then how we can fix that, I think is something that I'm strong at. Hopefully, we'll see. This is my first year.
I would say that my greatest strength is probably plot. So if you are the type of writer who's like, I know I have some giant plot holes, I can find them for you. And the other thing that I really love is just brainstorming. So like I will throw just a bunch of ideas at you and kind of see, if something sticks, if something starts working, or like prompts you to come up with an idea that might, fix that gap that we've spotted. So so if you're looking for plot help, that's my favorite.
All right. Did everyone get a chance to answer? Sorry, I wasn't. Okay, cool. Aaron asked, for those of you who were mentees, what was your relationship like with your mentor? And for everyone, what do you hope for in your relationship with your own mentee? A lot of you kind of already talked about this, but if you have anything to add. If you don't, that's fine, because we did talk about it quite a bit.
Well, I've had two past mentors. One of them I'm co-mentoring with this year. So we clearly stayed in touch. That book is not the book I landed my agent with, but she did read and CP that book for me. Like she's been there for me at every step of this. And when I've had various calls in my journey, et cetera, like her advice was one of the first that I went to. And we're having a lot of fun just even prepping to mentor together. And my 2020 mentor was Emily Theed. And like she probably leaves me a voice memo every other day. We still talk very, very often. Even now I'm working on edits of my Pitch Wars book, and I am calling her and asking her, what do you think Jameson would do in this situation? I'm really stuck on this. So I can't emphasize enough like how valuable both those relationships have been to me, because it's not like they're people who know my book and my characters inside out and how I write and what I need. And it is the most valuable part of my Pitch Wars experience, like just having that level of support and communication constantly in both ways that my journey has gone. Because, one time I was not someone who signed an agent after Pitch Wars, and one time I was, and the relationship is identical in both situations.
Yeah, and even though I wasn't a mentee, I hope that I am a safe space for my mentee. And I hope that we can be friends, because in my previous two mentorship programs, I like to I hope that I'm still friends with my mentees, and I hope they feel safe enough to reach out to me anytime with questions or anything I can do to help.
So I was a mentee in 2017 with Amy Trueblood, who is awesome and amazing, and everybody should go buy both of her books that are out. They're like very good historical YA. I would say that our relationship was more on the sort of like professional side. Like I'm not, sending her voice memos every other day now in 2021. But I think our relationship was, being kind of more like professionally mentorship type focused. I think the common theme here that Lyssa spoke to a bit as well is like having somebody who just like fundamentally got my book from day one without me, like, and understood things about it that I didn't necessarily identify myself. And because of that, she was able to pull on all of these threads that were all there, all in the text, but were not things that like I probably could have come to on my own. And so I think like that was the really kind of like deep, rich source of our relationship. And she's continuing to be such an incredible champion of my writing and cheering me on all along the way. And then not that this was the question, but I can say a little bit too about like my past two mentees, like Anne Freistat, who was my mentee in 2019, her book is coming out next year. It's called What We Harvest. It's also incredible. Everybody should go buy it. It also has like the most stunning cover you've ever seen. Our relationship post Pitch Wars has morphed into like an incredible friendship. She's also like gone on to do critique and beta reading work for me. And so I really like that sort of evolved into this more reciprocal thing where it's not just me providing feedback on her work. She's been really instrumental in helping me with the new book that I'm working on. And then Zan Kaur, my mentee from last year, she's revising with her agent right now while I'm on deadline. And so we've been doing like accountability stuff together. And so it's been really great to see post Pitch Wars and post mentorship how, like I said, those relationships can evolve into something that's more reciprocal and peer-to-peer, because in most cases, your mentor is probably not that much farther along in their publishing journey than you are.
All right. And I just need to add, because like, even if you have a mentor-mentee relationship that doesn't turn into like an amazing friendship, that's fine too. Like some people, it just doesn't work out, right? And mentors aren't required to continue like reading your future work and that kind of thing, but hopefully they do. But just because they don't doesn't mean that they're a bad mentor or that you're a bad mentee. Sometimes it just doesn't work out. Like one of my good friends who's been a mentor multiple years, she was always bragging like, oh, I'm really good friends with all my mentees, blah, blah. And then last year, they're not really like great friends. Like they still talk, whatever. She can ask her questions, but they're not friends anymore. So now I get to tease her back because sometimes it just doesn't work out, and that's fine. All right. Danny asked, how do you plan on celebrating a successful Pitch Wars season with your fellow mentors and mentees? Sleep seems like a good plan. Group nap.
So we're talking like post showcase.
Yeah.
Yes, definitely sleep. I've had to prescribe both of my mentees like a week's worth of sleep post showcase in the last couple of years. Even when you're not doing like a massive like page one rewrite kind of revision, I think it gets so hectic and also so like emotionally taxing at the end. I think in both situations, my mentees have been sort of like doing the like road runner off the cliff, like legs flailing underneath them for like a couple of days post showcase, where they're like, I'm going, like I'm going to research everybody and send out 1 million queries today. And then like all of a sudden hit the wall of like, actually, never mind, I'm going to go be unconscious for 2 weeks now. So yeah, sleep seems like a good answer.
Yeah, I'm excited. This is my first year, so I don't know what to expect. Well, I kind of know what to expect because I'm friends with so many mentors and mentees. But sleep sounds good. Maybe we can Zoom and eat a cake over Zoom together. So I'm for eating something and cake and sleeping.
I don't think this definitely doesn't count as celebration, but I have a sequel to write. So I think that's what I'm going to be doing. Probably not sleeping for a few years, and that's fine. It's okay.
Yeah, write a book is a good answer too. All right, Kristen asks, I'm a severe underwriter, so am I. What advice do you have for underwriters who struggle to meet the word count for science fiction fantasy particularly?
I'm like immediately wondering if you're a plotter or pantser, because if like for science fiction fantasy, I'm thinking world building, because that's usually where like the extra words come from. So like if you find yourself under, like maybe just like go through and like rethink out your world, just kind of write about it, get more of that done, and then see if that will like help pad your book, because probably where it's kind of lacking is that world building. So just go back and think about that, I would say.
Yeah, I mean, it's not like this isn't a hard and fast, no exceptions kind of rule, but I think generally speaking, if you're way under word count, not just like, you're 75K for YA fantasy, like that's still within the realm of reason. I'm talking like under 50,000 words potentially. I would say, generally speaking, you're probably missing some development in one of kind of like the key story building blocks. So one of those would potentially be world building, like Gabi said. One of those would be character arc and development. So I would think about like how's the main character, or potentially multiple characters if it's multi-POV, how are they developing over the course of the story? How are they changing from beginning to end? There's a good series that's free from Helping Writers Become Authors on character arcs that I recommend checking out if you're looking to learn more about that. Plotting and pacing, I would say, would be the other kind of big piece of like, do you have kind of like all the key plot beats happening? Do you have sort of a good escalation of tension in between each of those key beats? For that, I would check out either Save the Cat Writes a Novel, or look into like try-fail cycles is another good way to think about like how tension is ebbing and flowing over the course of the book. But generally speaking, I would say world building and description, character development, and kind of like your emotional content of the story, or plot and pacing. My first instinct would be one of those is probably missing something. And I think that that's a good skill as a writer to develop too, is being able to identify which of those things is not where it needs to be. And also, I envy you because I am the opposite of this.
Yeah, just echoing what Kylie's saying, I am an underwriter. My first draft of Vampire Hearts and Other Dead Things was 50,000 words. And that's the draft that got into Pitch Wars. And so it's just a matter of knowing like what you need and what you're leaving out as a writer. In my case, like my plot, like it actually has all the same scenes and chapters except for one as that first 50,000 word draft. But I leave out setting completely, like in a first draft. And I also leave out like emotional development with my characters. Like, it's just like, this is happening. I don't care how they're feeling in the moment. I'm just moving the plot along. So I know that I leave out those things. And so those are the things that I go back in and beef it up. It's 86,000 words now. So that was 36,000 words of emotional response and setting that I left out of that first draft. So.
Yeah, sometimes I'm an overwriter, sometimes I'm an underwriter. It just is different. But I would say go through your manuscript and really think about what you want the reader to know about the character's feelings during each moment, and see how you can use atmosphere and setting and the appearance of things in the environment to telegraph something about what the character is feeling in that moment. And just see if, in every line of dialogue, whenever something happens, that the really difficult thing is telegraphing to the reader what the character is feeling in that moment. So the Emotion Thesaurus might be a really good book to pick up because it kind of really helps you put in those feelings from each moment.
All right, that is so funny, Margie, because that is like my exact same drafting process too. Like I ignore setting and emotional development and the first draft as well. So it's so weird. But yeah, I think my contemporaries went from 40,000 to 70,000 in the first to like the third draft. Yeah. I just wanted to point out Fiona is here at 3 a.m. to listen to everyone. So yeah, I want to say hi. And then there was a follow-up question I wanted to get before we let Kylie go. What was the character arc resource that you mentioned?
Yeah, it is on Helping Writers Become Authors. It's like a 12-part series, 7-part series. Can't remember the number, but it's on character arcs. So I would Google Helping Writers Become Authors character arcs. And they have 3. One is like a positive change arc, negative change arc, and a flat arc where the character doesn't change. I recommend, regardless of what the situation of your book is, reading the positive change arc one. It's the most developed and in-depth. And it's sort of relevant and applicable to the other two as well, just with different kinds of changes. But I will also say, Save the Cat Writes a Novel takes a sort of like character arc approach to plotting and pacing. And so my like personal perspective on character arcs, I think, is kind of a like cobbled together hybrid version of both of those two resources. So that's another one that I would check out for character arcs as well.
All right, and I put the link to the first one, at least in the chat. All right, so we have maybe time for 2 or 3 more questions, depending on how long y'all take to answer them. Aaron asked, by the way, we're at 7:07. That's where we are for questions. We're answering questions from 7:07 p.m. Eastern time. Do you pitch a series different than pitching a standalone novel?
I hate giving like blanketed responses, but I want to say don't pitch a series. Like you pitch one book at a time. Yeah, I just think it's really, I have a lot of thoughts on this and I'm going to try to condense them. But when you have like, your one book should be able to stand on its own. Just like when you're querying a book or like pitching a book, you want to pitch that one book because what you want is for someone to be invested in that, not the second one, because the second one's never guaranteed. But also, I mean, just making sure that that one book can stand on its own. Like if you're pitching a series because you're like, no, this book doesn't work without the rest. I personally am of the opinion that means that first book isn't finished because it should be able to stand on its own. There can be threads that are dangling, but like overall, like it should be a complete story that has a somewhat satisfactory ending. Again, I hate saying like blanketed, like don't do that, but I would just say caution against pitching a series.
I think just to answer though, like, oh, go ahead.
Oh, I was saying I'm agreeing with Gabi, and you can say that this is a standalone with series potential. I think that's the best way to put it in the query.
Yeah, and I think to just maybe answer the most like literal aspect of the question that's being asked here is like in terms of your query, you're only going to be, the query should still only be about the current like first book in the series manuscript that you are submitting with that query. So it shouldn't be like one paragraph on book 1, one paragraph on book 2, one paragraph on book 3. And I think like the standalone with series potential is always a great way to go. I'll just say as like my little cautionary tale that I'll throw out there, if anybody's read my book and knows how it ends, like going to echo what Gabi said about the fact that you are never guaranteed the opportunity to get to write more books in the series. So I love my book. I love the way that it ends. I love, that it stands on its own, but I did definitely anticipate being able to write more of that story. Maybe I will one day, maybe I won't. But the number of like hate mail DMs I get like weekly from people who have read it and want to know when the sequel is coming, and my answer is shrug. Learn from me and the mistakes that I have made in my publishing journey, basically.
Yeah, just to add to that, I was surprised to learn how many opinions there are, like at various points in publishing. Like it's not just simply up to the author, of course, whether or not they get a series or a sequel. And trends are changing, and I'm sure they're rapidly changing. But some say that they're having trouble, like some publishing houses are saying they're having trouble keeping readership for sequels compared to how it used to go, and that there's more attention to standalones right now. Mileage may vary. But it's one of those things when I see it in a query, I cross my fingers for that person, but also there are so many people who have a say in whether or not that happens that it seems like the most conservative method would be make sure your book stands by itself.
All right. I'm so sorry. I just got some messages that made me a little emotional. So it's good. Everything's fine. It's just I shouldn't have looked at my messages. I did see Susan is trying to enter the chat for the second hour. So Susan, if you're watching, I see that you're trying to enter, and you'll have to wait until one of the mentors from the first hour leaves. So just a heads up, you're going to be able to log in right around 7:59, 8 o'clock. And Kelly or Brenda, if you're watching, if you could message Susan so she knows, that would be great. All right. Ruby asked, do you think YA has to, with emphasis, have a romance element?
I will come right out and say no, and I'm sure others will agree. I could name a dozen successful YA debuts recently that don't have any romance. Cold the Night, Fast the Wolves, Meg Long, Bad Witch Burning. There's a tremendous amount of them, and I know there's often a call for that too.
Yes, I agree. Romance is not required. And I will love your manuscript whether it has romance or not.
All right.
Ditto.
Yeah, I feel like it's consensus. I mean, there are some publishers that you do have to have a romance for to publish with that publisher, but not for the whole market. This is kind of a fun, I guess, personality get to know you question. If you could pick a fictional character to be your Pitch Wars mentee, who would it be and why? I've never seen this question before, so I had to ask it. I know, put y'all on the spot.
I'm regretting my answer that I like unlikable characters now. I'm sure Gabi's second guessing herself too. Like, so many of the characters that I love the most are like so fucked up. Like, I love Kaz Brecker, but I for sure would not want to mentor him. Just like definitely not. I'm gonna avoid books, but like, I don't know. I'm just like very enamored with Kylie from Ted Lasso right now. Like, I feel like she would be a really delightful vibe to have in my life. And we all know that she's like very good at rhyming. And so I feel like she's got the creativity it takes to come together with a like really compelling manuscript. So that's where I'm going to run.
I think that Leslie Knope works really, really hard, and I could work with that. So I just need somebody who works hard.
I'm going to go with Nick from The New Girl. I think he would be just an absolute delight to work with.
That would be so good.
He wrote a bestseller, right?
Yeah, he's a writer.
Yeah.
Don't get me started. I have opinions.
No notes.
All right. Gabby's going to join us in just a second. She had to go get her charger. Been there. Anyone else want to answer?
I finally thought of one. Okay. So Patroclus from Song of Achilles, because I feel like he has the angst and the emotional and the level of neurotic being who is also wholesome that we can get along with really well.
All right. Sorry, I'm trying to find my spot. Okay, here we go. How soon? There's two questions that are pretty similar, so I'm going to go ahead and just do them 1, 2. How soon before submission should you stop revising? From Amy, and then I'm going to find the second one. Sorry, I know it was here somewhere. How many CPs and our beta readers should you use before you start querying, applying to mentorship programs, etc.? And there was another one about basically how polished should a book. Oh, here we go. I know books are supposed to be fully edited again in Pitch Wars, but if our book is mostly edited but not completely finished, is it still worth submitting? So all three of these questions are kind of getting at the same thing. How ready should a book be before submitting to Pitch Wars?
I mean, I'll say that like I am looking for somebody that I feel that I can help improve their manuscript, or that I can identify, how we can make your manuscript stronger. And so I got bad news for you. Your book is never done editing. I'm still finding mistakes in my book, and it's out in paperback now. So I think like it's hard to say what the, like the question asking, like I mostly revised my manuscript, but it's not completely done. It's like one person's perception of what fully revised versus another's is going to be so wildly different. I think that what I always say is like I applied to Pitch Wars because I knew that there were still problems in my book and I had run out of ideas about how to fix them. And I also knew that there were probably additional problems that I was not identifying. I knew that I had a really strong concept and a really good voice. I wasn't getting the reaction I wanted from agents, and I couldn't quite figure out what it was missing. And so Pitch Wars was a good fit for me. But I'll also say that Pitch Wars isn't quite like querying agents, where you have to be kind of cautious about not pulling the trigger too soon, because you don't want to, query people before you're ready and then potentially not be able to re-query them if you revise later. There's no sort of like consequence to not getting into Pitch Wars. So you can always reapply with the same manuscript next year. So I don't think there's any like shoot your shot, man, is basically what I'm saying. As far as the like CPs and beta readers go, I think like it's really great to get used to getting feedback from your writer, from, you know, your fellow writing community, you know, hearing from people who are your peers, helping you to develop those skills. But it's also really scary. So I don't think there's like a hard number that like everybody has to have done that before they go into pitch wars. My mentee from last year, Zan, I'm like coaching her into getting her first critique group right now because she's felt so sort of like anxious and paranoid about sharing her writing with other people that she's just not been able to like pull the trigger on that emotionally until now. And so like, you know, it's not like there's a deadline for you to figure that part of your writing life out.
Yeah, I totally agree. There's no like set way that this is ready now. There's no like number of like edits that you should go through. Everyone kind of edits differently anyway. So like someone's like third draft would be very different from someone else's. So I mean, it all is very just, if you want to try pitch wars, I think you should. I think the main thing is like, is it like written? Like, is the whole thing done? And if it is, and you like want to submit to pitch wars, I think you should, yeah, like Kylie said, shoot your shot. And in terms of like CPs and betas, yeah, no set number. Different CPs are going to have different skills, different things that they're better at helping you with anyway. So someone might have 5, but like each CP is like focused on like a different area. Someone else might just have 2 and they cover all their bases. There's no real set number for it. So when you have as many as you feel like you need, as many as you're comfortable with as well. So yeah.
All right. I think those are all great answers. And it's really hard. People ask for us to quantify things that are impossible to quantify. So yeah, y'all did a great job. Okay, so we're about to say goodbye to these mentors, but before we do, I want each of them to provide their single best succinct query letter tip, and also let us know where we can find you online. And as you're talking, I'll be posting your Pitch Wars profile page in the comments as well. So we'll start with Margie and we'll just go around the circle.
I'd say make sure you're being specific enough about the stakes so that I can care about the stakes. I think that's the most common thing I see when I'm looking at queries is I see what the stakes are, but I don't know why I care or the character cares. So make sure it's specific enough to get that emotional response.
Me now? Okay. Margie stole mine. So now I'm mad. But no, completely agree. I think the sort of specificity of stakes is really critical. I read a ton of queries. And so I see a lot that are like, and if they don't do blah, 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 their world will change forever. Tell me what they actually like need to do and tell me what they believe will actually happen, what is actually going to change in their world. Something can be specific without giving away the ending. So saying like, and if they don't get the amulet to the temple in time, zombies will descend on the world and blot out the sun. Like that is very specific, but does not tell me how that book ends. So I think don't be afraid to add something that doesn't feel super generic, but still gives you that really dramatic, like dun 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 moment at the end of the query.
I'll add to that I love a good hooky first sentence, something that's really in voice, that's grabby. That to me it's not like traditional query advice, but whenever I see it, I'm always like, ooh, this is really interesting. So like a good hooky, voicey first sentence.
I think one, Margie and Kylie both stole mine because that's a big one, but also making sure everything relates to what your main character wants. So in that same vein, like making sure you're clear about like your main character's goals. I read a lot of queries, and a lot of times they'll introduce the main character and then they'll immediately just go into like things that are going wrong, but not ever tell me like why the main character would care about those problems, or like even like something that might sound very obvious, like, oh, the world is going to end. Still kind of, there should be like an emotional tie into like why the main character is invested. Like having like world ending stakes doesn't mean the main character isn't invested. Why is the main character the one that has to do this? So just making sure everything relates very specifically to their goals and what they want.
I totally agree with everything everyone else said. I would say a fun experiment to do is to rewrite the first sentence, not the first sentence, the first paragraph of your query 10 different times. Like force yourself to make 10 different versions of the first paragraph of your query. Because when you force yourself to, you are forced to think about your story in 10 completely different ways. And chances are the discovery that you make by the time you get to the 10th version of that paragraph is going to give you that aha moment. I know how to sell this, because you're really writing copy. You're writing like advertising copy. And so you in addition to having the desire, stakes, and action, you want to convey that information in a very succinct and also a very compelling way. And when you do things 10 times, it forces that creativity.
All right, that is all for this first hour. We're going to bring on the next set of mentors. So thank you all mentors so much for volunteering your time for mentoring and also for answering everyone's questions today. And I put all of their links in the comments so you can go check them out. All right, bye y'all.
Thanks, everyone.
I'm going to stop. Okay, there you go. All right, so the second set of mentors, you're about to come on the screen. So just a heads up so you're not surprised. And Susan should be able to come in any second now. I saw she just tried again, so hopefully she'll try again. All right, hello, welcome. So this is the second set of mentors for tonight's chat. I didn't get to do this before, so if I disappear, if my internet gets disconnected or anything, Laurie, I'm going to put you in charge of keeping the chat going because you've done a few of these, so you know how they go. All right, and I'm going to ask the mentors to start introducing themselves. We are still answering questions from 7:08 p.m. Just a heads up on that. So if you ask the question later, hopefully we'll get to it, but we'll try. And so the mentors, if you could just say your name, what kind of stuff you write, introduce yourself, and also your history with Pitch Wars, whatever it may be. So we'll start with Emery, and we'll just go around the clock. Puppy.
Hi, I'm Emery Lee. I am the author of Meet Cute Diary, which I'm going to show off because I got the sprayed edges and it's super cute. And that's a trans rom-com that came out this year. And I also have another rom-com out next year. But I also write fantasy, sci-fi, and across age demographics, middle grade through adult. I did Pitch Wars last year as a mentor, and it was my first experience with Pitch Wars. But it went really well, so I'm happy to be here, and I'm excited to meet my new mentee.
Hi, I'm Laurie Dennison. I write YA, mostly contemporary. I've done some other stuff too, but mostly contemporary lately. This is my 5th year as a Pitch Wars mentor, and I was actually a mentee in 2012. So I've been a part of Pitch Wars for a really, really long time. I'm excited to be back.
Hi, everybody. My name is Alex Brown. I write, what do I write? Young adult horror comedies. And then I have a short story coming out in a YA folk horror anthology coming out next year called The Gathering Dark. So that'll be super fun. And my Pitch Wars experience, I was an alternate back in 2014, back when alternates were a thing that existed. So now I'm excited to be back as a mentor.
Hi, everybody. I'm Jenny Perinovic. I write YA. I'm working on my first adult project right now, primarily fantasy, specifically historical fantasy. And I'm co-mentoring this year with one of my best friends, Kiri McCauley. We've been friends since we were teenagers, actually, like real teenagers. And she was a 2017 mentee. I have never done Pitch Wars. I applied last year as a mentee, but was not selected. So it's like really surreal for me to be on this side of it. And I'm so excited to give back, and help a writer and love our mentee.
Hey everyone, I'm Susan Crispell. I write adult and YA, usually contemporary, sort of magical, small town, quirky books. My first YA is coming out next June. So super excited to mentor YA this year. I've been a Pitch Wars mentor, I think this is my 5th year. And previous years, I've been an adult mentor and was an adult mentee back in 2014 as well. So super excited to be back. I took last year off and I missed it terribly. So thrilled to be back into the Pitch Wars family and excited to see what submissions we get and find a mentee this year.
All right, awesome. Okay, so we're going to dive right in. Like I said, we're in questions at 7:08. What is your opinion on an extended first chapter fight scene? By the way, I told the previous mentors before we went live, feel free to jump in whenever you want to answer a question. You don't have to answer every question if you feel like it's been answered already, but it's kind of a free-for-all.
I feel like when it comes to a first chapter fight scene, it's really rare that you're engrossed enough in the character to be engrossed enough in the fight. So I think usually when it comes to like extremely actiony, like high stakes kind of scenes, I usually advise that they not be too much in the first chapter, or that if you are going to write an extended like fight scene like in the first chapter, that you make it one with a lot of interiority so we can follow why we care about this character and why we care about what's actually happening in the fight as opposed to just like the action sequence.
Yeah, I agree with that a lot. I think a lot of times people hear the advice that you should start like in the middle of the action. And that is true, but I think sometimes that gets twisted into like, oh, that means write an action scene. But the thing is, we need to be grounded in the scene and we need to get to know the character before, like Emery said, like before you can care about the fight scene. So I think, you know, there's a balance. Of course, you can have a fight scene that works well, but you have to have that grounding and you have to know why we care.
I agree 100% with both of you. Like I have read fight scenes in first chapters that I've loved, but they've included a lot of interiority and a lot of like slowing down and zooming in on the main character and like letting us know why we should care about them and like getting these glimpses of that make us want to root for them. Otherwise, it's like I don't even know what's going on. So don't confuse me in your first chapter, please.
Yeah, and one thing I'll add to that with that starting with action, I also think it's more starting with an active character, somebody who's doing something. So it can be a big action scene if you've given the grounding and enough world building and character to tell us who they are, what they're doing, and why this fight scene matters to them. If we don't know that, the fight is just going to be this big random fight scene, and you might lose readers because they don't have that initial grounding that they need. But as long as they're being active in that first chapter and doing something and the reader knows why they're doing it, I think you'll be fine.
Yeah, for some reason I started thinking about movies that start with action scenes, and sometimes I end up like favoring the bad guy because I'm just like, oh, I like the way that person looks, and that's obviously not what the writers intended, right? So that's a trap you can fall into. Someone asked about trigger warnings. We did, so I posted the link, but we posted a post today that has a whole bunch of questions on what to include in your original submission, and that is covered on there. It's a question in that post, so I'm going to skip that because you can go to that post and read it. All right, Carrie asked, what makes you the most excited when reading sample pages?
For me, I think just a really good voice. Like I love reading books where it kind of feels like someone's just telling you a story, like you're having a conversation or sitting like right across from someone and they're like, so listen to this, right? Like how ridiculous. And you're like, yeah, I know. And you just kind of keep going. So I think just if I start reading something and like the prose is really beautiful or it's like very funny, like there's just a certain something about it that feels real and feels lived in. That's what gets me super excited.
Yeah, I agree with that. Voice for me is a big thing. If I've read the query and the story sounds really interesting to me, if I get in there and the writing is really strong and I get such a good feel for who the character is and it's somebody that I want to keep reading, I will not want to put it down until I'm finished with that submission, and then I'm going to want to read more. So really anything that gives me a way to connect to the character from the first, couple sentences, first paragraph is going to be key.
I think like the way I look at it is like on the first page of every book, there's a promise. And like we could argue like that's what makes the first line of a book, like the hook in that first line, so important, is because you're making this promise to the reader, whether that's like suspenseful, whether it's humorous, whether it's like, you know, something that makes you really connect with the character. There's something in that first page that is telling us as a reader, if you stick around for this book, you're going to get blank. I want that promise to stand out. I want it to feel fresh, and I want it to feel like something I can't get somewhere else. So that can be like a variety of things. It can be like, you know, the humor in the voice, or it can be, oh my God, like I need to know like who killed this person that we now know is dead from the first page. But I just want there to be a strong promise that tells me that I am going on a journey in this book that I'm not going to be able to get by picking up a different book.
For me, it's absolutely voice. Like there's this moment where like you just feel like you know the character, and it like you like sit up and you're like, yes, this is it. And it's a character that gives you something to root for. Like I don't necessarily want to like have to want to be friends with that character. It's like there is something about the way that they are viewing their world that compels me, that makes me want to keep reading because there's something interesting about them.
Yeah, I agree with what everyone else said. And I was thinking about a book that I think about a lot that to me does that, what we're talking about, that's really hard to quantify, but it does it really well, is the Scorpio races. And I felt like that was one where from like, you just really felt like you were entering into a world that you wanted to know more about through the eyes of these characters. And it's a hard thing to quantify, but I agree with everything everyone else said.
All right, we have a question from Emma, and I'm going to expand it a bit because we get a lot of questions about this. So Emma's question was, at which point while reading in the manuscript do you usually have an idea if you're interested in mentoring? But if you could also just kind of talk about your whole process from when you first log into your submission inbox to when you choose a mentee, what does that usually look like for you?
I will say, as a previous mentor, you know, when I get into my submission inbox, I start by just, you know, I start with the first one that comes in and I go through until the end because for me, that's easy. You don't have to get in early. I will say that. It doesn't matter when you submit during the submission window. I'm going to read everything. So don't feel like you have to get in early. But I start there just so I know where my place is. And I read through the queries. I mark the ones that seem really intriguing. Then I go back and do a deeper dive into, you know, the sample page or the sample chapter we're given, the synopsis, and flag more that I think are really interesting. And then I'll, you know, spend a couple days thinking about it, request a few, think about it some more, request a few more, dive back into my submission list. And usually, you know, I'm making requests throughout, you know, the whole period because I keep thinking about once. I'm like, oh, that one was really intriguing. I want to know more about it. And then, you know, once I get into a manuscript, if I've requested a partial or a full from a potential mentee, it really, to me, comes down to, do I connect with the character? Do I have a good vision for how to help it? Am I seeing what, you know, the manuscript needs? I ask questions of potential mentees when I request things and really try and figure out if I'm the right person to help them and do I have a good vision for it. If it's something that I'm loving, I'll read it through to the end. If it's something where I hit a point and I think, I'm not really sure about this, I'll put it aside and maybe come back to it. So even if I request a full, that doesn't mean I'm going to get through the whole thing, unfortunately.
I'm going to go ahead and jump in because my process is very similar, and having done this for a couple of years, I think I've gotten down to a place that I'm more comfortable with it, and I kind of go back to the same thing. I start at the beginning and I read everything that comes in. I read the query and then I read the pages. I don't read the synopsis at first. I'd wait on that until after I've kind of started to look at which ones am I interested in, which ones really stick out to me, what do I think I'm going to request, and that's when I might read the synopsis. If I know I'm going to request it, I actually don't read the synopsis until later because I don't want like the surprises spoiled or whatever. And so I think for me, it's interesting. Again, hard to quantify, but I've had the past 2 years, a really strong idea just from the query and pages. Like if it just really resonated with me, this is really a strong contender. And I know that pretty quickly for me because I know what my strengths are. And that generally is to do with character arcs, tightening up prose and shortening things. That's another strength of mine. So those are things I can see. And again, I have to love it. I have to love it enough to read it over and over again, at least 2 times, usually more than that. So I have to love it enough to read it over and over again. And I have to have a really clear vision. And also I ask a lot of questions because I want to know that my vision matches with your vision.
I would say that for me, like I tend to know, I would say like from the first page, I tend to have a strong feeling about the book if I'm going to choose it. Like I'll have like this like something about this is drawing me in. And it's not even necessarily that I'm like, oh, like, you know, it has the best opening line or anything, but it's just, you know, like an urge where I'm like, there is something in this book that I know I kind of want to keep reading. But that said, like my process is kind of like I read everything. When it all comes in, I'll go through, I'll read. I'll start with the query in the pages, and then I'll kind of make notes for every book, like exactly what I think its strengths are, what I can already foresee as weaknesses. And then I'll basically put them in like categories, and I'll have like my first, like these are like the most pressing, and like my like middle, and then like my like least pressing. And that basically kind of gives me not like I read through all of them, and then I'll come back and actually go through all of them a second time before I request. But it kind of gives me this like emphasis of like how I felt the first time, because a lot of times that gut feeling that you have at the beginning kind of drives you as far as like where you go next. So I'll go based on that, and then I'll usually request a bunch, and then I'll start reading through those. Like if I, you know, find that a book is not working for me, I'll usually DNF it. And then if I feel like I have the time, I'll maybe give it another chance. Sometimes I'll give a book 2 or 3 chances depending on like if what it was that was drawing me back. And then I'll just kind of keep going through and requesting more as I kind of like work through my list as far as which ones hooked me the most. But I do think usually I have a pretty good sense at the beginning of like from just like the submission package, like the first like chapter in the query of like which books I think are going to have the strongest connection for me. And I think that's because as a reader, I'm drawn to weird. I tend to like the voice I can work around, the plotting I can work around, the pacing I can work around, but I need it to be something fresh enough for me that it stands out. So I can usually tell within the first like 10 pages in like a query.
Yeah, I think for me, it's kind of the same. Like there's just something about it. I mean, it's like, you know, when you pick up any random book and you start reading it, either you're like, oh man, this is really good, or like maybe I'll come back to it later, you know? And that's just the thing about publishing, is it's all just so subjective that like what might work for me won't work for Jenny, won't work for everyone else on this chat. So yeah, it's kind of just, it's all sort of mystical and up to chance sometimes. But I do think that you know, when reading through it, usually at the beginning, if not by the midpoint, I can tell that I would be a strong mentor for it, just for like things that it might like need that I can bring to it. And the way that I go through submissions is kind of the same. Like I start from the beginning and go through. And this year I am co-mentoring, so we'll collaborate a lot. And Skyla and I will talk a lot about, you know, the ones that we like and bring them to the table and have a lot of conversations about which ones we think that we can help the most and kind of start narrowing them down from there. So yeah, I think for me, it's all about just which book do we think we can help the most, and whose vision will we match with the most. We'll ask everyone kind of a lot of questions as we read through and request, and what concept stands out, and what thing, kind of like what Emery was saying, like just what's fresh and new and exciting, and like Susan said, what will make us want to read it over and over again.
Yeah, just to echo everybody else, we're planning on going through, you know, all of them as they come in individually, because I'm co-mentoring, and then flagging the ones that stand out to us individually and then comparing and see where our overlap was. We have very similar taste, so I'm pretty sure there's going to be a lot of overlap. But the thing with us is it has to be something that we both love and we are both all in on. And so it's just going to have to be something that, like, you know, I could love a book and Kiri could not connect with it. So it's going to have to be that special book that we both love enough to read multiple times and then love enough to be able to help it too.
All right. I love getting insight into everyone's inbox strategies because mine is chaotic. I'm not mentoring this year, but what was I going to say? So some of the mentors said they're going to look at subs as they come in, and actually they won't. They'll be looking at them after the sub window closes. And actually the way that Gail does the website, sometimes some mentors won't even know what order they come in unless they look very closely, because Gail likes to switch it up so that it doesn't be the same every year. So Gail is our tech director, by the way, the person who runs our website. She's amazing. Yes. All right. Besides someone sending something that's on your list of things not to send, are there any other red flags for when you look at a submission?
The biggest red flag for me last year was honestly just people who didn't actually submit a full query or a full synopsis. If you don't know your book well enough to like submit those materials, like they don't even have to be great. Like your query can be, I've seen a lot of really bad queries with really good books, and like I don't care if the query sucks if your book is good. But if you don't even write a query or don't even write a synopsis, that's going to be the first thing that makes me go, okay, this person has no idea like what their book is trying to do, and like if you don't know what your book is trying to do, I can't help you get it there. And I think that's probably the biggest one. And then the other one is when a character doesn't seem to have like a desire or a drive or like an intention. And like I, as a writer and a reader, I actually really like passive characters, but like your character has to be passive in that they actively want to not be active, if that makes sense. They shouldn't basically be like, I have no say in anything and I just don't care. It should be more like, you know, I don't want to be a hero, because that's adorable and I love that. But basically your character should have some drive in some direction or the other. If I read your query and I read your pages and it's just kind of like, this character is good with everything, then I'm going to be like, where is your story going? And like, why am I supposed to be invested in it?
I think for me, like what I've encountered so far, like not mentoring, but in like the reading I've done for people, the thing that is like the biggest red flag for me, especially when we're talking about YA, is I voice a character that either feels too old or too young. Like if this is like just not knowing or not nailing that voice for YA to make sure that you really know your audience, because I think if that is a flaw that I'm seeing like really early on in those pages, it's going to be hard to like overcome that without either like totally scrapping everything and starting over in a new genre, in a new like age category.
Yeah, I definitely agree on the voice of the character and whether it fits that age category. Previously mentoring an adult, I would come across ones that really sounded like YA. And while I loved them, they didn't fit the category that I was mentoring. So I would email them after it was over and say, hey, I really love this, but I don't think it's adult. And, you know, now coming into the YA space, I think it'll be similar, of people either sounding too old or too young. And that's not an easy fix, especially in Pitch Wars when you've got such a tight timeline to do really big revisions. So the book can be amazing, but maybe it's not the right space to work on edits for it. I know that's a hard thing, especially if you're, you know, dead set on, oh no, my book fits this age category, but it's not coming across that way to others. You know, that's going to be harder on the mentors to try and help figure out, and on the potential mentees to, you know, that's hard to see when you're submitting it and you're so deep in your story.
Yeah, I just wanted to reiterate something Emery said. Someone I can't remember if it was today or another chat. Someone said at the start of the story, your character has to really want something, and that something that they want could be, I want nothing to change. I want everything to stay the same. So it might not be, but it might be. So yeah. All right, Ebony is about to start this war on my YouTube page as per usual. Are you a coffee person or a tea person? This is an ongoing conversation on my channel. Welcome, everyone. You got to declare your side.
Oh man. So here's the thing. I love coffee, but it's really bad on my acid reflux. So I've had to pull back and it's upsetting. So I'm drinking tea now, but my first love, always coffee.
I'm a both, but coffee first.
Yeah, definitely coffee. I worked in coffee shops off and on in high school and college and after college, and I can't live without it.
Team Coffee's doing good today.
I'm both, but I lean on the tea side most of the time because I can't have too much caffeine after a certain time or I won't sleep. So
I don't sleep anyway, so it don't matter.
I actually drink an obscene amount of both coffee and tea, but like boba tea is literally my brand. Like it's in every book I write and it's like everything. So like I have to go with tea, and like I'm Asian, so like that's our thing.
I love boba tea too. All right, we answered that question. Okay, how do you feel about realistic antagonists with little to no redeeming qualities?
I need to talk about this because I have been having this conversation with so many people lately. I'm so sick. No, I'm not going to say I'm sick of, but like I hate the expectation that all antagonists have to have like a tragic backstory that somehow attempts to justify why they did that like horrible thing. Like most antagonists in real life do not have tragic backstories. Most antagonists come from privilege. And like on top of that, like even looking beyond the privilege angle, like I would rather have an antagonist, and I love antagonists. I adore them. They're like usually my favorite part of the story. I love an antagonist that I can say, yes, you're a jerk, and I appreciate that about you. Great. I love an antagonist that has like maybe one redeeming quality, like you know, this guy who's like ruined the entire world but really loves his dog. Like that's cute. But like I don't need like a super like redeemable like, oh, like let's make up for all of these flaws like antagonist. Like no, give me a jerk who like ruins everything, who's like just like an absolute like, you know, like dumpster fire. I'm here for it. Thank you.
Emery like took the words out of my brain. Like I love an antagonist who like is just bad, but maybe like has a cat. Like, you know, like give me like a Dr. Evil. Like he's just a bad guy who really loves his cat, and like that's fine. I don't need him to like be a cinnamon roll on the inside.
I think, I don't remember where I heard it, but there was this thing that was like, a story is really only as good as its villain. And I think that it holds true. And if you think about, you know, whoever your favorite villain is, like they make the book, the movie, the TV show, the thing that they're in, like you just can't stop paying attention to them and like watching them. So yes, essentially everything Emery said, but I love to have a villain that you can just like love to hate, where you're like, you're the worst, but like I'm kind of for it sometimes. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't think they have to have redeeming qualities, but there has to be something really interesting about them that makes me like them or makes me love to hate them, I guess is a better way to say it. I don't need to like them, but I need to like the way the character is written so that I can be interested every time they're on the page. So agree with Emery, like don't give me a tragic backstory just because you want them to have some sort of good quality. Give me something else about them that I can appreciate and like them for who they are.
Yeah, I agree with everyone else too. I don't think they need the redeeming qualities, but I do like them. I do like to understand the motivation. And I think that I like complex villains, not necessarily there's something redeeming, just that I understand where they're coming from. Like I like a motivation.
All right, I'm not a mentor, but I need to rant because the only thing that I don't like is when you have a character that's all bad, like I'm talking like kicks puppies, like just completely evil, right? And then when it's time for the main character to defeat them, they're like, no, I can't kill them. They blah, blah, blah. I'm going to save them. It makes me so mad. I'm like, kill him.
Yeah, it's like, what are you waiting for? Like, just go. It's
Yeah.
fine. Everyone's okay with it.
Yeah. All right. I don't know. Maybe these characters are better people than me, but all right. Caitlin asked, do you prefer books where there is a solid main character and their journey, or books where there are larger casts who have a lot going on?
This is like that coffee or tea question. I feel like it's like both.
Yeah.
I love stories with like huge sprawling cast if I can like have time to know and love all of them. But I also really, really love a very character driven, like introspective narrative that just focuses really deeply on one character. So I guess both.
Yeah, I'm going to say, oh, go ahead, Laurie.
I was just going to say I agree. And I've actually mentored both. So like I've mentored ones with huge, big cast, and I've mentored the single character journey both. So yeah, I'm a both.
I'm a both when reading for fun. For me, I think with Pitch Wars, I probably need a smaller cast. We can have really great side characters. You know, that cast can be large, but for the POVs, I'm going to be better as a mentor if it's a smaller cast so I can dig deeper into those characters and not, for me, have to figure out all of these different moving pieces. Like my books, I write small casts because my brain just doesn't work that way. So as a mentor, I think I'll be the same way.
That's funny because I'm like, my brain is the opposite. My brain is good with like chaos. I only think in chaos because I have no like logic. But I feel like, for me, I'm like really thinking on this question because I feel like I'm torn because I prefer large casts. I think large casts are more interesting. And I love when there's a lot of moving cogs, but I feel like at the same time, I like the character journey. Like, I'm like, can I combine these and get like a large cast where we actually follow like the character journeys of the cast? Because I feel like on the one hand, when each individual character has like their own like very separate thing going on, what I'm thinking now is this is not a standalone book. This is going to be a series. Because with that many pieces, we need enough time to actually care about all of them. But like, if it's like if it's a semi-large cast, like a, 3 to 4 main characters, I think like that you can still do like the main character journey arc almost but with the like cast, and I think that's great. I think if you're doing like a really large cast, like then I start to wonder like how do we give enough, because I do want a character journey for all of them. I feel like if there's too many characters, we get to the point where you're like, you need like I'm working on a story like that right now where I'm like, I need like 5 books in this series to be able to actually cover everything so we can actually follow all these characters. So that's where I think it gets a little bit messy.
I'm just going to say everything Emery just said.
All right. Emma asked, what are some things that draw you to a writer's voice?
I feel like similar to that earlier question, to me, it's about feeling like the character's like letting you in on a secret, like you're learning something about them that's really intimate, like that's the kind of voice that really draws me in and makes me want to keep reading and spend more time.
I think like if the voice and the character can get me to care about whatever they care about, even if I know like nothing, if they like are really into bird watching or something, and I know nothing about bird watching, but I can see through, their point of view, why that's so important and why that's so interesting, and see why I should be invested in care. I think if you can convince me that I should go along for the ride, then like I'm gonna go.
For me, I think it's like a sense of confidence. Like it's like the way that this voice is telling this story. Like it is, I can trust that I'm in like good hands to be carried through the entire like narrative and arc. And it's so hard to like put my finger on like what instills that confidence, but there is like just this sureness, I think, in the writing itself, like that they know who this character is and they know what the story is, and I'm along for the ride.
So like for me, I think it can be like short answer is like heart and or humor. Longer answer is basically if you can convince me either A, to fall in love with your character, to feel like their emotions are so strong that I have no choice but to see this through, then you won me. Or two, if you can make me laugh, then you won me. If you have a character who is, and I always compare to anime on this, because when you watch an anime, the characters are so like absurd. They're weird, and they all always have at least one trait that just makes them very bizarre and like makes them really stand out. If you have a character like that, I'm going to be interested just because I'm going to be like, what is this character doing? What are they doing? And now I want to know. And when I want to know what they're doing, I'm going to read the whole thing. Same thing. Like if your character like can really just like sway me emotionally, then like I'm going to be like, I need to know this character like makes it to the end. So I'm going to read the whole thing. So those are basically the two things that are going to actually suck me into the story, like out the gate.
Yeah, I 100% agree on the emotional connection. If there's something about them, the way they talk, the way, the words they use, the way they describe whatever they're doing or who they're with, that makes me care about them. That to me is a big part of the voice, is drawing the reader into their world, showing us how they see their world and what's important to them, the things they're passionate about, or the things that, are driving them as a character. That's what's going to make me care. And that's really how I'm going to connect to the voice in the story, is just, how you're showing this world to me.
All right. We had a lot of convo back and forth in the comments about villains and stuff. So I'm like trying to find the next question. We answered that question. We talked about series already, so we're not going to talk about that again. Amy asked sexual violence on the page, yes or no. So the mentors who don't want to see it have definitely included that on their wish list info. So just read their wish list because it will say that there. Okay, good question from Brittany. If a mentor's wish list is a great match, but their strengths match our own, would it be better to sub to a mentor who is good at things we might be lacking, even if the wish list doesn't fit as well?
That's a really interesting question. I think, for me, at least with my wish list, it's stuff that I'm really interested in and I would love to see. There are times that I'll get submissions that surprise me, and it's not something I would have thought I wanted, but the way it's written and the story they've put forward in the query and in that, the first chapter, it's really engaging. But I do think, we put our strengths out there. I don't think any of us, and I could be wrong, but I don't think any of us really listed absolutely everything we're amazing at. So just because we put our strengths in our wish list doesn't mean that there's not something else we could be really good at helping you with. And it's something we could work through. If I picked a mentee that's like, oh, they're really good in this, and I see this thing that I can help with that I didn't tell them about on my wish list, that's something I'd be willing to work through. And it's a discussion with the mentee. Say, okay, these are the possible options for it. So I hate to say one way or the other. I definitely think it's who you think would be the best fit for your book, whether they put it on their wish list or not.
I agree with a lot of that. And I think that I feel like, I don't know, I've had a lot of questions in the past couple of days about like, well, you don't have historical on your list, or you don't have this, but I think other things fit. Like, are you open to it? And so basically my feeling is about that. And I've tried to answer everyone who's asked, like, the reason that I don't list historical is because I don't think I'm great with historical world building. So I don't put it as something I want, but I also don't put it as something that I don't want, because I like plenty of historical books. So if I think lean toward the wish list more than like what we say our strengths are, because you don't know if the wish list fits, you're more likely to get something that's going to resonate with us. That's my opinion.
I agree with all of that too. And I would also add like, I mean, part of it just kind of comes down to what exactly you're looking for. Like, for instance, I don't have like on my wish list that I'm really good at researching Publishers Marketplace, but I'm really good at researching Publishers Marketplace. If that's what you're looking for, is someone who can like advise you on like how to navigate the agent world, I can help you with that. It's not on my list though. And I feel like there's a lot of stuff, you know, in general that kind of like, it depends on what you're really looking for. Like if you're like, I know I'm looking for someone who's like really going to help me with character, and this person tells you that, like, you know, their best thing is plot, they're not that good with character, then I wouldn't submit. But I think in general, like, I mean, we're all authors, and I think we all tend to have a lot of experience that may not show up in the wish list. So like, I'm not here like toot my own horn or anything, but like, I didn't put that like my strength is voice, but I get a lot of compliments on like voice when I write. So like, even though I didn't put that as my strength because it's not my main focus, but like, it's still something that I think as a published author, I have enough of a gauge that I can like help you with that. So I think there's a lot of things that like, you know, we just kind of develop from experience. So even if it's not listed as like a strength per se, like it doesn't mean it's not something that we know how to do and like can help you with.
I do think too that even if we do, you know, have the same strengths, everyone approaches things, the same thing differently, just based on life experience and who we are. So I wouldn't like use that as a deterrent, because like the way that I would help someone with voice, even if voice would be like, you know, me and Skyla's mentee's strong suit, would be different from how Skyla approaches it, from how the mentee approaches it. So like, it's a collaborative process, and it's not, you know, for me, it's never like one person knowing more than the other. It's kind of just like, here's my thoughts. What do you think about my thoughts? And then we kind of have a back and forth about all the thoughts. So yeah, I would say if you're, you know, feeling the wish list, definitely lead more toward that.
I would agree with that too. I think Kiri and I have different strengths. And again, like it's a very collaborative process. And I mean, I'm like, my background is teaching. And so like, I feel like that too, like I can teach something that I may not necessarily be great in. It's all about like, how do you approach it? And like listening to each other and having that back and forth, I think is really important. So I would also lean towards the wish list.
All right. Amy asked, what is your motivation for being a mentor? What is your why? Because none of y'all get paid, so.
So I'll jump in on this one because I think actually we had a couple tonight who are like the 2014 mentees. So this is like a long time crew, but I was a mentee in 2012. That was a long time ago. And it was the first YA I'd written, the first like basically anything I'd written. And I couldn't believe that I had the opportunity. And I was so grateful. Not like my mentor just taught me things that you couldn't find in a craft book. You couldn't read online. Like there wasn't so many things from industry to how to massage, how you present a character through word choice, like these things that were specific to my book. Just so many amazing things. And I was so grateful for that. And it wasn't just that, but all the people that I met and who I've remained beta readers and critique partners and friends for years now. And so I love this program, and I'm always like, I just want to keep paying that back to other people. I want to keep building those relationships. And this is a tough business. Like the friendships and the relationships really make it more manageable.
My reason is totally selfish, so I'm going to say it to make y'all look better. I don't find enough of the books I want to read on shelves. If I walk into a bookstore, 90% of the books that I want, that I pick up don't reflect the world the way I see it. They don't reflect characters who look like me, who act like me, who reflect like the things that I actually enjoy reading about in books, to the point that I have 90% gravitated towards reading media that's not even made in the United States. And so for that reason, I see authors all the time who are writing that stuff. And more often than not, they either go on to self-publish or they give up writing altogether. And so when I see these people writing these stories that I love and knowing that they're reaching smaller audiences than they would like to, that's when I realize that there's a problem between what the industry is putting out and what is actually being written. And that means that disconnect is not in the writer or necessarily in the market / the readership, but it's in the industry. And so as an author in the industry, I feel like it's my job to actually step in and do something about that. And so that's basically why I'm here, is to make sure that the books that I actually like are getting put on shelves. And so that's what I do.
I just have to say, Emery, that is not selfish at all. Come on now. That's a really fantastic reason to do this. I'm a lot like Laurie, being a former mentee. I just learned so much. This community is so great. And it's fun to be a mentor, to be a part of somebody else's journey and know that you had some tiny little piece of helping them be a better writer. Even if it's just showing them that you love their book and there's somebody out there who loves it as much as they do, that's huge for a writer who is, struggling to get their story out there, to find somebody who loves it. And, if I can be that one person for somebody and, let them know that they should keep going, I want to do that.
For us, for me personally, it's because I had such a long journey to finding my agent. I think I signed with my agent a week to the decade mark of querying, and I had met so many people who were so generous with me in those 10 years, especially in the beginning when I was like a new baby writer who didn't have to be nice to me and didn't have to help me. And they did out of the kindness of their hearts. They invited me to their homes and read my books. And I learned so much from them that it feels like this is the least I can do, is help somebody else who's starting their journey. And I know for Kiri, she was a 27 mentee and she had such a fantastic experience. For both of us, we just want to, really just help somebody else the way that we were helped.
Yeah, no, I mean, I agree with everything everybody said. I think it's, publishing is difficult, to put it politely. And I think it helps to know that, there are people in your corner. There are people who will support you. I can't talk anymore. It's been a very long week and it's only Tuesday. So here we are. But yeah, I mean, I think for me, I was an alternate in Pitch Wars in 2014, and I've done a couple of other mentorship programs too. And then I've mentored in a few other things. And it really is just about, kind of making sure that future storytellers can come in here and tell really cool things and put something out there that, a teen really needs. Like, I think that's so cool that we have the ability to do that and to help someone kind of on that journey. And through helping someone on that journey, we can help anyone who picks up that book feel represented or feel seen, or feel, loved or validated and all that. Yeah, so I think that's why I do it, is one, to support the writer, but two, just to support everyone who will ever love that book.
All right, awesome. Okay, we have it's weird to go from that question to like a kind of much more like technical question, because I'm like, oh, that was so nice, and now we're gonna ask this. This is a good question, but it's just like, it's a weird transition. Sorry, I'm awkward. Okay, if your story would be helped by having a map and you get a request for a full, is it okay to include a poorly drawn draft map?
I would be open to seeing a map. I mean, I teach middle school, so I'm pretty sure there's nothing you could send that like would surprise me in terms of quality. I'm very, open to interpreting on my own. But yeah, I would love to see a map if you have it.
I feel like I'm totally good with like the author sending like extra stuff like that. Like I know like with one submission I got last year, when someone sent me the full, it had like a character chart and like all this kind of stuff. Like that's super cool. I also feel like, you know, when you get the request for the full, it's going to be a direct email like with the mentor. So like if you want to like, you know, let them know like, hey, I'm attaching the full. Also, I have a map if you'd like to see it. Like I'm sure like any mentor can like let you know too, like if that's something they do actually want to see for that specific project.
Yeah, I'm a very visual person for a writer. Like I need to see a map because my brain comes up with all of these weird things that is not at all what the writer is saying. So for me, if there's a map, you want to offer it up, absolutely, please say, hey, I've got this.
Yeah, I've definitely been through like halfway through a fantasy book and looked at the map and been like, oh, those countries are not at all where I thought they were, just because I am a geographically challenged person. Yeah. All right. So it feels like everyone's okay with you including it. What is your best tip for overcoming writer's block?
Take a break.
And like give yourself a break, like forgive yourself for having writer's block. I feel like it's easy to just kind of be like, why can't I do this? And be really angsty about it. But like, it's okay. It's fine. We're not doing brain surgery here. Like you can, you know, get some fresh air, watch some TV, read a manga, whatever you want to do. It's okay.
Yeah, like go live your life. Because often like living your life is going to give you more to draw on. I'm a better writer for all the breaks that I've taken.
Yeah, do something that makes you happy, because writer's block is one of the worst feelings and you feel bad about yourself and you're not happy. So do something that makes you happy, give your brain that break it needs, and usually something will come, some idea will spark because you're doing something that you enjoy. And then you're much better off getting back into the story because you've got that really good, happy place you're coming from.
Yeah, I agree definitely with the taking a break. And for me personally, when I read and like find things that I like, and I will just use that break to just read, because a lot of times between work and family and writing and like reading is the thing that sometimes gets pushed to, I feel guilty for doing it. So a lot of times when I'm taking a break, I do like to read. But again, you gotta do what's working for you and what brings you peace and joy and whatever that looks like. Be kind to yourself, because writing is hard. This business is hard, and treat yourself like you would treat your friend. You know, take a break, be kind.
Yeah, one of my favorite things to do is to move my body and also not engage my brain at the same time, because I love audiobooks, I love podcasts. So usually when I'm walking or cleaning or whatever, I'm listening to something, but that does not help me break through writer's block because my brain is engaged. So if my brain is not engaged in something else, I usually find things happen without me trying, you know? All right. Amanda asked, did we already ask this question? Let me know. I can't remember. I'm sorry. I've done too many of these. What makes a beginning stand out to you? Did we talk about this already? We did? Okay. How do you feel about grumpy main characters?
Yes, please. I love grumpy main. As someone who is extremely grumpy in real life, it's amazing. They should never change. It's great.
I said this on Twitter the other night, but like, if you've got why Roy can't, please send it to me.
I just love a grump. I mean, yes, please.
Yeah, grumpy, snarky. I'm happy with that. Like, I know they tend to be harder books to sell. You know, in some cases, I write really snarky characters, and my agent's always like, you can't do that. Like, you got to tone it down a little. I'm like, but that's what I want. So yes, please give it to me. I will be so happy to read it.
I'm definitely a grump writer. Most of my characters are not very upbeat, optimistic people, and I'm totally here for that. Love that.
Yeah, I wanted to say something earlier, but then the conversation moved on when we were talking about like likable characters, likable villains, and like a lot, that likable word gets thrown out a lot. But honestly, being likable is not nearly as important as being compelling. And a character can be compelling, no matter what their disposition may be. Okay, Brittany asks, how many submissions does Pitch Wars usually get? I don't have the numbers in front of me right now, but it's been around 4,000 for the last couple of years. And last year it jumped quite a bit. I think it was around 4,500, but don't quote me on that. Lee, if you're listening, don't quote me on that because I'm not sure. I'll give you real answers after we're done. All right. I have to scroll a while to find the next question. Okay. How do you draw a good distinction between middle grade and YA? What traits are unique to either?
Somebody asked a similar question to this the other day, and I think something that's like important to keep in mind when it comes to like middle grade and YA, specifically those two categories, is that age is actually very important. Like you're not going to be able to sell a 12-year-old YA character, like it doesn't exist. And so if you have a 12-year-old, it's middle grade, that's it. All you can do at that point is make it middle grade appropriate, in which case like things like cursing and sex, which are common in YA, are not things that you're allowed to have in middle grade. And then like in terms of things like, romance, violence, that kind of stuff, it's just going to be like a toned down version. If you're considering aging your character up to like 14 or older, which would then be allowed in YA, but it usually leans 16 plus, you can also do that. But I would say like the biggest thing to kind of keep in mind is that like with YA, you're looking at a significantly more mature experience, and there tends to be this level of, I don't want to say like jadedness, but like with middle grade, you tend to have stories that kind of look at the world with wonder, whereas in YA you tend to have characters and like a world that's a little more cynical. And that's not to say that like it literally has to be like cynical. Like I write rom-coms, like I write humor and like love and romance, but like to say that like that level of maturity where you can go from like everything is exciting versus like, a little more realism, a little more like the unfortunate realities of existence. I think that's kind of like where the big like thematic and like tonal vibe goes from middle grade to YA. And like I said, just things like sex, drugs, alcohol, like they're not middle grade.
And I think it's also important to keep in mind that like kids want to read up, so you can have like a 12-year-old who's going to want to read about 12-year-olds, but they're probably not going to want to read about a 10-year-old. And the same thing is true with YA. Like the reason why 12-year-olds do not exist in YA is because it's going to be a really hard sell to get a 17-year-old to read about a 12-year-old, generally speaking. And so you really just have to think about who are you trying to reach with this book, right? Are you writing for 10 to 12-year-olds, or are you hoping to reach teens and then adjust the age of your main character based on that?
Yep. Or you can have an adult book that has a 12-year-old, but that's going to look very, very different. All right. So I'm just going to answer Sarah's question real quick before we say goodbye to all of you. So do people reach out to mentors in advance? If so, what about? So the mentors all have on their wish list ways that you can contact them. So make sure you only reach out in a way that they have indicated they're okay with. And some may just ask for wish list clarifications. I do have to say, do not DM any mentors and pre-pitch them. Don't give them like a paragraph long description of your book. That's something we explicitly disallow in Pitch Wars. Don't blame them, blame us. We make the rules. And so don't do that. But a lot of people just ask for clarifications on wish lists. And some people may ask questions about if they're comfortable working with like a disabled mentee or something like that as well. That's fine too, which I feel like most of them are, but yeah. All right. I think, okay. I was like, did I forget something? Okay. So we're going to have each of our mentors say goodbye, bid us farewell with your favorite concise query letter tip, and also where we can find you online. I am going to, as you talk, post your Pitch Wars bio page in the chat. So they will have your Twitter and your social media links and everything. But if you're like, I'm on Twitter all the time and never Instagram or whatever, you can say that. So we'll just go around the clock. This time we'll start with Emery.
Okay, so query tip. What I always tell people is that a really good way to figure out how to focus on your query is, instead of taking your book and trying to boil it down to 3 paragraphs, take a one-line pitch and expand that into 3 paragraphs. So if you can come up with a short pitch of what your book is, like this story is about how, like, for instance, like with my book, Meet Cute Diary, it's about how a trans boy's blog blows up and leads him to have to fake date a fan in order to combat a troll campaign. So like that is the one-line pitch, and I can now expand that into 3 paragraphs, which is usually a lot easier because when you start with a full book and try to boil it down to 3 paragraphs, there's a lot of detail that you as the writer will feel is more important than it is. And so that tends to be a faster process for me. As for where you can find me, I'm on Twitter. I am at Emery Lee Who. I am on Instagram at Emery Lee Books. I am on TikTok at Emery Lee Who, but I barely use it. And I'm also, my website is emeryleebooks.com.
Right, Emery stole mine. That's exactly what I was going to say. Like, try writing the Pitch Wars pitch, the like 50-word pitch first, and then take that and expand it out. Because I think my thing is, it's hard to do, but a query needs to be threaded to itself. And I don't know if that makes sense, but like, you can't throw random things in there because there's no context. So like where it begins and the middle and then the stakes at the end, they have to all connect to each other. And if you do that, take the short pitch and expand it, it tends to work better that way. So yeah, I'm on Twitter if you need to get a hold of me.
I would say keep it really focused on like your main character and the things that they want and the things that are in their way and what will happen if they don't get what they want or what will happen if they do get what they want, depending on what the stakes are, right? So you also want to have their like the main character's internal stakes and the external stakes so that we, as the people reading it, know why we care. But I think some practical advice is just to go to the library or a bookstore and just read the back jacket copies of books or the inside cover copies of books and just see how they summarize everything and kind of get a feel for like that quick pitch, because they don't give everything away, but they entice you to pick up the book and read it. So read as much of those as you can. And then I am on Twitter at gravity_fail09. Made that in college a long time ago and haven't changed it. Yeah, so I'm mostly there. So tweet at me if you need anything.
So my tip is to be as specific as possible, whether that's about your stakes, about what makes your main character unique, or about like what's just really cool about your world. I mean, I primarily write fantasy, so the most success that I've had with queries has been instead of saying like, and with her magic she does this, it's like what specifically is like special about her magic. If that makes sense to everybody. So just really harp on like what is unique about your specific story that you're telling. And you can find me pretty much everywhere at Jenny Perinovic.
It's hard going last with the query tips because I would say everything you guys said. It's exactly what I was going to say. One thing I will add is in your query, try and have a little bit of the voice that you have in the book. Not saying write it in first person, like that's not what I mean. But the way you write your book, the way your character talks and views the world, if you can get a hint of that in your query, it's going to go ahead and give the mentor for Pitch Wars or an agent a flavor of what they're going to get in the book. And you're already enticing them and kind of luring them in by this really great character and the story that you're putting them through. So if you can get some of that into your query, you're going to be kind of just a little bit above, so that you're getting people's attention. And you guys can find me online. I'm on Twitter and Instagram mostly at SB Crispell.
All right. And I am Sarah. Thank you all for joining us. If you have any questions about Pitch Wars, you can email pitchwars@gmail.com or find us on Twitter at Pitch Wars. And I have a podcast called Queries, Qualms, and Quirks that asks published authors to discuss their journey from first spark to day of publication. And I've had episodes with, I think, about 10 to 12 Pitch Wars people, so you can check those out if you are so inclined. I'll put a link here in here. Okay. And I think that's everything. Everyone stay safe and good luck. Happy pitching. Bye, y'all.
Bye.